The first time my wife called me broken, she said it in a courtroom, under oath, with her hand resting on a Bible and her eyes fixed on the judge like she was asking for mercy instead of money. The room was so quiet I could hear the old clock above the clerk's desk ticking like it was counting down the last seconds of my old life. Lauren stood 10 feet away from me in a white dress that probably cost more than my first truck, her blonde hair pinned back, her face soft in that practiced way people use when they want cruelty to look like pain. "He is broken, Your Honor," she said, and her voice did not shake. "Physically, emotionally, financially. I carried him for years." A few people in the gallery shifted in their seats. My lawyer, Marcus Reed, stayed perfectly still beside me, one hand resting on a blue folder no thicker than a Sunday newspaper. I kept both palms folded over the handle of my cane, polished oak against skin that had learned the shape of it over the last 18 months. I did not look at Lauren. I looked at Judge Margaret Whitaker, a woman with silver hair, square glasses, and the kind of silence that made liars uncomfortable before they knew why. Lauren's attorney stepped forward with a stack of papers and a voice that sounded like polished furniture. He said my company was unstable. He said my injury had made me unpredictable. He said Lauren deserved the house, 60% of Caldwell structural repair, support payments, and control over several accounts because I was no longer capable of managing the life I had built. Built. That word almost made me smile. I had spent 22 years fixing cracked foundations, bowed basement walls, sagging porches, and homes other contractors walked away from. I knew the difference between something damaged and something done. But in that courtroom, Lauren wanted the judge to believe I was both. She glanced at me then, just once, and I saw it in her eyes. Not grief. Not fear. Confidence. She thought the cane made me small. She thought the limp had rewritten my name. She thought if she said broken enough times, the room would forget who had built the roof over her head. Judge Whitaker turned to me. "Mr. Caldwell, do you wish to respond?" Marcus leaned slightly toward me, but he did not speak. We had planned for this moment down to the breath. I lifted my head slowly. My left knee ached from the cold courthouse air, and the scar under my pant leg pulled tight when I shifted, but my voice came out calm. Steady. Cleaner than I expected. "No, ma'am," I said. Lauren's mouth curved like she had just won. Then I placed 2 fingers on the blue folder. "I only ask that before you decide what I owe her, you read the file she signed." For the first time that morning, Lauren stopped smiling. The courtroom did not react all at once. It changed by inches. Lauren's smile stayed on her face, but it lost its warmth first. Then her shoulders stiffened. Then her eyes moved from me to the blue folder, as if the paper itself had spoken her name. Her attorney, Mr. Barlow, gave a small laugh that was meant to sound casual. "Your Honor, we have already submitted the relevant financial disclosures." Judge Whitaker did not look at him. She kept her eyes on me. "What file are you referring to, Mr. Caldwell?" I slid the folder toward Marcus, and Marcus slid it across the table with 2 fingers, slow and careful, like he was passing something fragile. "A signed insurance and care statement," I said, "along with supporting records." Lauren blinked once. It was fast, but I saw it. For 18 months, I had watched her face change around lies. I knew the tiny movements now, the pause before an answer, the softening of her eyes when she wanted sympathy, the way her hand drifted toward her necklace when she needed time to think. This time, her hand went there and found nothing to hold. Judge Whitaker opened the folder. The paper made a soft sound against the bench. It should not have felt loud, but it did. In that room, a single turned page had more weight than every insult Lauren had thrown at me. "Page 7, Your Honor," Marcus said. His voice was calm enough to make the air colder. Mr. Barlow stood straighter. "May we see a copy?" Marcus reached into his briefcase and handed him an identical folder. He had one for everyone. That was Marcus. He did not like surprises unless he was the one bringing them. Lauren leaned toward her attorney, whispering, but he was already reading. His face did not drain of color the way people imagine in stories. Real panic is quieter. His eyes narrowed. His jaw tightened. He turned one page, then another, and for the first time since we walked into that courthouse, he stopped performing. Lauren whispered again, sharper this time. He did not answer her. I looked down at my cane, at the clean line of wood running under my palms. I remembered sanding it myself in my garage after the physical therapist told me I might need support longer than I wanted to admit. Lauren hated that cane. She said it made me look old. She said clients would lose confidence if they saw me with it. She never understood that the cane was not proof I had fallen. It was proof I was still moving. Judge Whitaker adjusted her glasses and read silently. 1 page. 2. 3. The clock kept ticking. Somewhere in the hallway, a door closed. Lauren's breathing changed. I did not have to look at her to know. I could hear it, shallow and uneven, the sound of a plan meeting a wall it had not budgeted for. Then Judge Whitaker stopped on page 7. Her eyes moved left to right, slower this time. She looked at the signature at the bottom. Lauren Caldwell. Blue ink. Dated 11 months after the accident. Mrs. Caldwell, the judge said, "Is this your signature?" Lauren's mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Her attorney touched her arm. "Answer carefully," he murmured. She swallowed. "It appears to be." Judge Whitaker's voice stayed level. "That was not my question." The room tightened around us. Lauren looked at the page as if staring long enough might change the letters. "Yes," she said finally. "That is my signature." I felt Marcus shift beside me. Not much, just enough for me to know he had heard the first lock click open. The judge looked back at the document. "In this statement, you described your husband as courageous, mentally sound, financially responsible, and physically injured while protecting employees at an active job site." Lauren's face hardened. "That was for the insurance process. It was under penalty of perjury," Judge Whitaker said. No one spoke after that. The sentence landed softly, but it landed everywhere. I did not smile. I did not move. I just sat there with both hands on the cane Lauren thought made me weak, watching the first crack appear in the story she had built to bury me. Before Lauren ever learned how to turn sympathy into a legal strategy, she used to introduce me like I was the safest thing in her world. "This is Ethan," she would say, slipping her arm through mine at cookouts, open houses, charity breakfasts, anywhere people wore name tags and measured success by the shine on your shoes. "He fixes the houses nobody else can." Back then, she said it with pride. I was 32 when Caldwell Structural Repair got its first real office, if you could call 2 rented rooms behind a plumbing supply store an office. The carpet smelled like dust, the ceiling tiles had water stains, and the sign on the door was printed at Staples because I could not afford anything better. But it was mine. Every inch of it. I had started with a used Ford F-250, a ladder rack that rattled over every pothole in Franklin County, and a toolbox my father left me when his hands got too stiff to work. I was not fancy. I was not loud. I knew concrete, drainage, load paths, and the quiet panic in a homeowner's face when a basement wall started bowing inward. Most people see a crack and think the house is dying. I see a story. Soil pressure. Water where it should not be. Weight traveling the wrong way. There is always a reason things give way. That was what I loved about the work. A foundation does not pretend. It tells the truth if you know how to read it. My morning started before daylight. Coffee in a travel mug, steel-toed boots by the door, estimates printed on a clipboard, and the smell of wet lumber and cold air waiting outside. I spent years under houses, in crawl spaces, beside sump pumps, in backyards where clay stuck to your boots like guilt. I came home with dust in my hair and cuts on my hands so small I never noticed them until Lauren touched them. In those early years, she would wait up for me in our little rental duplex off Morse Road. Wearing sweatpants, hair in a messy knot, reheating pasta in a skillet because the microwave sparked if you looked at it wrong. She would ask about my day like every beam and bracket mattered. I would explain settlement cracks with a ketchup bottle and napkins at the kitchen table, and she would laugh, then say I made broken things sound hopeful. Maybe that was why I loved her. She looked at my rough edges and did not flinch. At least, not then. When her real estate career started, I helped her study listings at night. I drove her to showings when her old Honda would not start. I paid for her licensing course with money I had been saving for a new compressor. I did not tell her that part until years later. She cried when she found out, kissed my cheek, and said she would never forget what I believed she could become. For a while, she did not. She sold her first house on a rainy Tuesday in Westerville, and we celebrated with burgers, fries, and 2 slices of grocery store cake eaten straight from the plastic container. I remember her sitting across from me in that booth, eyes bright, saying, "One day, people are going to know both our names." I believed her. I believed in us the way a man believes in a wall he built square with his own hands. The company grew slowly, then all at once. 1 crew became 3. Residential repairs turned into commercial inspections. We moved from the rented rooms to a brick building with a real sign out front. Lauren moved from starter homes to luxury listings, and the clothes changed first. Then the car. Then the circles we stood in. I did not mind. She had earned nice things. I liked watching her walk into rooms with confidence. But somewhere along the way, she stopped saying I fixed the houses nobody else could. She started saying I worked in construction. Then she started saying I owned a little repair company, like the word little made her feel taller. I noticed. I just did what men like me do too often. I filed it under stress, under ambition, under marriage being a long road with rough patches. I kept showing up. I kept building. I kept believing that if the foundation was strong enough, the house would hold. I did not know yet that the deepest cracks are not always in the concrete. Sometimes they are standing beside you, smiling for a photograph, waiting for the right storm. The morning everything changed started with rain, the kind that turns job site dust into gray paste and makes every board, bolt, and boot feel heavier than it should. We were reinforcing a 3-story apartment building on the east side of Columbus, an old brick place with tired bones and a basement that smelled like damp concrete. The owner had ignored warning signs for years. Hairline cracks became stair-step cracks. A door that stuck in summer stopped closing in winter. By the time my crew arrived, the building was not failing loudly. It was doing what dangerous things often do. It was whispering. I remember standing beneath the temporary bracing, rain tapping the plywood above us, listening to the groan of old wood settling against steel. My foreman, Luis, asked if we should call it for the day. I looked at the wall, then at the 2 younger guys hauling equipment near the west side. Both of them knew enough to still believe speed impressed me. Something in that structure felt wrong. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just wrong. I told Luis to clear the area and get everyone back. He moved fast. I took 3 steps toward the younger workers and raised my voice, not in panic, just firm enough to cut through the rain. They turned. That was when the brace shifted. People think life-changing moments come with time to understand them. They do not. 1 second you are a man with a schedule, a mortgage, a wife waiting for dinner, and a half-finished cup of coffee in your truck. The next second, the world narrows to sound, weight, and white light. I remember pushing one of the younger men by the shoulder, hard enough to make him stumble away from the danger zone. I remember Luis shouting my name. I remember the smell of wet dust. Then I remember the floor meeting me like a fact I could not argue with. There was no movie speech. No brave music. Just confusion, rain, and men calling for help while I stared at a strip of sky through broken plastic sheeting and tried to move my left leg. It did not answer. At Grant Medical Center, everything became fluorescent light and soft voices. A nurse kept asking me questions to keep me awake. My name, the year, who was president. I answered because answering felt like holding a rope. Lauren arrived with mascara under her eyes and her real estate blazer still on, her heels clicking fast down the hall. When she saw me, she covered her mouth and cried so hard the nurse brought her a chair. She held my hand through the first night. She told every doctor I was strong. She told Luis I had saved those men. She told my mother I would come back from this because I was Ethan Caldwell, and Ethan Caldwell did not quit. For a while, I believed the woman at my bedside was the woman I married. Recovery was not heroic. It was humiliating in small, ordinary ways. Learning to stand with a walker, counting 6 steps like they were 6 miles, sitting on the edge of the bed while a physical therapist half my size told me to try again. My back burned. My knee locked. My pride had to be swallowed every morning with pain medication and black coffee. Lauren brought soup at first. Then she brought work calls into the room. Then she started missing appointments because a client needed her. I told myself she was scared. People handle fear differently. Some cry. Some organize. Some disappear into busyness because silence makes them face what changed. But the first time she looked at my cane, really looked at it, I saw something colder than fear. We were leaving a follow-up appointment 6 weeks after surgery. I was moving slowly across the parking lot, one careful step at a time, the August heat rising off the asphalt. A couple walked past us, and the man glanced at my cane for half a second, nothing cruel, just a glance. Lauren's hand slipped out of mine. Not all at once. Just enough. By the time we reached the car, she was walking 3 feet ahead of me. That distance was not far in numbers, but I felt every inch of it. I did not know then that 3 feet would become separate bedrooms, separate stories, and finally opposite sides of a courtroom. The word did not arrive in the courtroom first. It arrived months earlier in a ballroom full of chandeliers, polished silverware, and people who smiled like they were closing deals even when they were only asking for water. Lauren had invited me to a real estate awards dinner at a country club outside Dublin, Ohio, the kind of place with wide lawns, white columns, and valet attendants who looked uncomfortable taking the keys to my work truck. I almost did not go. My leg had been stiff all day, and the February cold had settled deep into the joint like it had signed a lease there. But Lauren stood in our bedroom wearing a navy dress and pearl earrings, studying me in the mirror while I adjusted my tie. "Please try to look comfortable tonight," she said. "Not feel comfortable. Look comfortable." I told myself she was nervous. It was a big night for her. She had sold 3 luxury homes that quarter and wanted the room to see her as someone rising. So I swallowed the answer in my throat, picked up my cane, and followed her into a world where my limp felt louder than the music. At first, I did fine. I shook hands. I smiled. I let men in tailored suits tell me they had heard I was in construction, and I did not correct the smallness they put around the word. Lauren floated from table to table, glowing under warm lights, laughing with brokers, lenders, investors, people who use square footage and zip codes like social rank. Then Derek Sloan walked over. I had met him twice before, both times at events where he stood too close to Lauren and spoke to me like a man checking the condition of something he planned to replace. He was tall, polished, expensive in that borrowed money kind of way. Lauren introduced him as an investor. He looked at my cane and gave me a smile without kindness. "Still recovering?" he asked. I said, "Every day." He nodded like that amused him. Later, near the bar, I heard Lauren before I saw her. Her voice carried just enough to reach me, wrapped in laughter. "Ethan used to build houses," she said. "Now he can barely cross a room without that thing." The small group around her chuckled politely. Derek laughed the loudest. I stood there with a glass of water in my hand, watching condensation slide down the side like a clock melting. Nobody had shouted. Nobody had caused a scene. That was what made it worse. Cruelty does not need volume when the person saying it knows exactly where to aim. On the drive home, the highway lights passed over her face in pale stripes. I waited for an apology. She checked her phone. I waited for shame. She cited a message and smiled. "Finally," I said, "you embarrassed me tonight." She did not look up. "Do not be dramatic, Ethan." The cane rested between us against the console. I could feel every inch of it. "You made a joke out of the accident." That time she turned, and the softness she used in public was gone. "No," she said. "I told the truth. You are not the same man anymore." The tires hummed over the road. I kept both hands on the wheel. "I am healing." She gave a short laugh, tired and sharp. "You are broken. Stop pretending you are still who you were." I did not answer. Some sentences do not ask for a response. They enter a room inside you and start moving furniture. When we got home, she went upstairs without another word. I stayed in the foyer, coat still on, staring at our wedding photo on the wall. In it, Lauren was laughing against my shoulder, and I was looking at her like a man who had never considered betrayal could wear the same face as love. The cane tapped once against the hardwood when I shifted my weight. The sound echoed through the house. That was the night I understood the accident had not broken our marriage. It had simply exposed the part of it that had never been built to carry weight. After that night at the country club, Lauren stopped pretending in small ways first. She no longer walked beside me when we entered restaurants. She moved ahead, smiling at the hostess, leaving me to follow at my own pace while my cane tapped behind her like an announcement she wished she could mute. At home, she started taking calls in the laundry room with the door half closed, her voice low and bright, the kind of brightness she used when selling a house with foundation problems by talking about the kitchen. I did not accuse her. I had learned something from years of inspecting damaged structures. You do not start swinging a hammer just because you see one crack. You watch where the water goes. You check the corners. You find out whether the problem is cosmetic or structural. Lauren thought my silence meant I was tired. Maybe part of me was. Pain does that. It makes every ordinary task feel like carrying lumber uphill. But silence can also be a measuring tool. In March, she began asking questions that did not sound like a wife asking about a husband's day. She asked how much of Caldwell Structural Repair was in my name alone. She asked whether the office building had appreciated since we bought it. She asked if the house on Briar Ridge was protected by the same trust my father helped me set up before our marriage. When I looked at her across the kitchen table and asked why she needed to know, she smiled without showing her teeth. "I'm just trying to understand our life," she said. Our life. The phrase landed wrong, like a key sliding into the wrong lock. 2 weeks later, I saw Derek Sloan's name on her phone while it lit up beside the sink. No message preview, just his name and a tiny blue dot. Lauren snatched it before the second buzz. "Client drama," she said. I nodded, because nodding can look like belief when it is really just patience. By April, the bank statements started changing. Small transfers first, then larger ones, labeled as consulting fees, staging costs, marketing reimbursements. I had been married long enough to know the difference between privacy and concealment. Privacy has boundaries. Concealment has patterns. One Friday afternoon, Marcus Reed called me after reviewing a few documents I had sent him quietly. Marcus was not a dramatic man. He had the voice of someone who had seen too many people ruin themselves by needing the last word. "Ethan," he said, "do not confront her yet." I was sitting in my truck outside a physical therapy clinic, rain ticking against the windshield. "Why?" I asked. There was a pause, not because he did not know what to say, but because he wanted me to hear it cleanly. "Because she may already be building a case." That sentence followed me home. It sat in the passenger seat. It walked into the house with me. It stood behind Lauren while she poured a glass of iced tea and asked why I looked so serious. I said my knee was bothering me. That was true, just not the whole truth. Over the next month, the house became a stage. Lauren smiled when neighbors were outside. She asked if I had taken my medication when her sister visited, loud enough for the room to hear. She offered to drive me places I could drive myself, then sighed when I said no. Once, when I dropped a mug because my grip spasmed, she was there with her phone too quickly, pretending to check a text. The pieces were small, but they pointed in one direction. She was not documenting recovery. She was documenting weakness. Derek's role became clear by accident, the way rot sometimes reveals itself when a baseboard comes loose. I came home early from an inspection in Powell because the client canceled. Lauren was in the sunroom, laptop open, back to the hall. I heard Derek's voice through the speaker, smooth and confident. "The judge needs to see him as unstable, not stubborn. If he leaves first, it helps you. If he looks dependent, it helps you more." Lauren whispered. "And the company?" Derek said, "If he is broken enough on paper, you get leverage." I stood there with my hand on the wall, feeling the house hold my weight better than my marriage ever had. My first instinct was not anger. It was clarity. Cold, clean clarity. I backed away before the floorboard near the doorway could creak. In the garage, I sat at my workbench under the yellow light, surrounded by old tools, screws and coffee cans, and the smell of sawdust. My cane leaned against the bench. My phone rested in my palm. I opened a new folder and named it simply, Lauren. Then I saved the first note, dated and timed. Not because I wanted revenge. Because when someone starts turning your pain into a weapon, the truth needs a place to live. By the time Marcus and I started building the real file, Lauren already thought she was several moves ahead. That was her first mistake. People who mistake kindness for weakness usually mistake quiet for absence. I was quiet, but I was not gone. Every morning, I still woke before 6, brewed coffee strong enough to stain the mug, stretched my left leg until the stiffness loosened, and drove to the office on Henderson Road with my cane resting across the passenger seat. The company did not collapse because I limped. Crews still needed schedules. Clients still needed estimates. Foundations still needed repair. Work became the one place where nobody asked me to perform damage for sympathy or hide recovery for comfort. My men looked at the drawings, not my cane. Luis still argued with me about material costs. The receptionist still left sticky notes on my monitor. The world Lauren tried to describe on paper was not the world I lived in, and that was what Marcus wanted documented. Truth is not enough, he told me in his office one Thursday evening, while rain blurred the downtown lights outside his window. Truth needs receipts. So we gathered them. Payroll records showing the company had grown 12% after the accident. Signed contracts from clients who requested me personally for inspections. Physical therapy notes showing steady progress, not decline. Medical evaluations stating I was capable of managing my business and personal affairs. I asked Luis and the two younger workers from the job site for statements, and both men gave them without hesitation. One of them, Aaron, called me afterward and said, "Boss, I have a wife and a little girl because you told me to move that morning." I sat in my truck after that call for 10 minutes, hand on the steering wheel, looking through the windshield at nothing. Lauren had reduced that day to a weakness. Aaron remembered it as the reason he went home. Marcus also pulled the insurance care statement, the one Lauren signed when the settlement process began. I had forgotten half of what was in it. She had written that I was alert, competent, financially responsible, emotionally stable, and injured while protecting employees during a structural failure. Her signature sat at the bottom in blue ink, neat and confident. Back then, those words helped unlock a caregiver benefit and temporary household support. Later, those same words would stand in front of her new story like a locked gate. Then came the money. I did not want to believe the transfers meant what they looked like they meant. A man can accept many things before he accepts being used by someone who once knew how he took his coffee. But numbers do not care what you are ready for. Consulting fees went to a limited liability company tied to Derek Sloan. Marketing reimbursements landed in an account Lauren had never mentioned. Several payments lined up within 24 hours of Derek's credit card delinquencies. Marcus found public records, civil filings, and a trail of debts Derek had dressed up in expensive shoes. The more we looked, the less he seemed like a successful investor, and the more he looked like a man standing on a rug he had already sold. I did not confront Lauren. That was the hardest part. At dinner, she would ask about my day with that soft courtroom voice, and I would say, "Busy." She would watch me take the stairs one step at a time, and I could feel her measuring how useful the image might be later. I stopped giving her scenes. No arguments in hallways. No emotional texts. No late-night speeches about loyalty. If she wanted to build a case out of fragments, I would give her nothing sharp to pick up. Instead, I saved emails. I copied bank records. I backed up doorbell footage that showed me leaving for work every morning while she told people I barely functioned. I printed call logs. I dated every note. I made 3 copies of everything, because Marcus said 1 copy is hope, 2 copies are caution, and 3 copies are preparation. The blue folder began on my kitchen table as a stack of paper held down by a coffee mug. Then it became 2 stacks. Then 3. Finally, Marcus placed it all into order: medical truth, business truth, financial truth, and Lauren's own words. When he slid the finished file across his desk, it did not look dramatic. No red ribbon. No thunder. Just a clean blue folder with tabs and page numbers. Still, when my hand rested on it, I felt something I had not felt in months. Not victory. Not revenge. Ground under my feet. Lauren had spent a year trying to prove I was broken. I spent that same year proving I was still standing. When Judge Whitaker reached the middle of the file, the courtroom stopped feeling like a courtroom and started feeling like a house during an inspection, quiet on the surface, every hidden problem waiting behind the walls. Lauren sat straight at first, chin lifted, hands folded, the perfect picture of a wronged wife. But each page took something from that picture. Not loudly, not all at once, just enough. Her fingers tightened around a tissue she had not needed until then. Mr. Barlow kept turning pages beside her, slower now, as if every sheet had become heavier than the last. Judge Whitaker looked over the top of her glasses. "Mrs. Caldwell, this statement says your husband remained actively involved in the management of Caldwell Structural Repair after the accident." Lauren nodded too quickly. "In a limited way, yes." Marcus stood. "Your Honor, page 12 includes monthly operating reports signed by department heads, payroll approvals, and client contracts bearing Mr. Caldwell's authorization from the same period." The judge turned the page. I watched her eyes move across the numbers. 12% growth. 43 active contracts. 0 missed payroll cycles. She did not smile. Judges do not need to smile when facts are doing the work. "Mr. Barlow," she said, "your filing described Mr. Caldwell as financially incapable during these months." Mr. Barlow cleared his throat. That was based on information provided by my client. There it was, small and careful, the first step away from Lauren. She looked at him sharply, but he kept his eyes on the bench. Marcus moved to the next tab. Page 16, Your Honor. That was where the money began to speak. Transfers Lauren had labeled as consulting fees, staging expenses, marketing reimbursements, clean words for dirty movement. The judge read the amounts, dates, and destinations. $5,000, $8,000, $12,000. All moving through accounts Lauren controlled, all landing near Derek Sloan's limited liability company or accounts tied to his debts. Derek was in the back row that morning. He had come in wearing a gray suit and confidence he had no right to own. When his name was read aloud, he shifted like the chair had turned warm. Lauren did not look back at him. That told me more than if she had. Judge Whitaker continued. These funds originated from a caregiver benefit account connected to Mr. Caldwell's post-accident settlement? Marcus said, Yes, Your Honor. The room changed again. Even the clerk looked up. That money had not been glamorous. It had been meant for transportation, home adjustments, therapy support, and temporary help after surgery. I remembered every form, every appointment, every hour Lauren complained about paperwork while signing documents that described me as competent when it paid her to say so. Now those same documents sat under the judge's hand like a mirror she could not turn away from. Lauren's voice finally broke through. I used that money for household needs. Marcus did not raise his voice. Then page 19 may help clarify the household. The judge turned to page 19. Email printouts. Bank confirmations. A message from Lauren to Derek, sent at 11:38 p.m. on a Wednesday while I had been asleep downstairs in the recliner because my back hurt too badly for the bed. Judge Whitaker read silently first. Then she read one line aloud, flat and precise. Once the judge sees him as dependent, I can push for the company and the house. Lauren closed her eyes. For 1 second, the polished version of her disappeared, and I saw the woman from the passenger seat months earlier, the one who had decided my injury was not a wound but an opportunity. Mr. Barlow whispered something to her. She shook her head. The judge continued to the next email. Derek says the word broken tests well emotionally. Use it if he stays too calm. The silence after that line felt physical. I kept my hands on the cane. My thumb found the small nick in the handle, the one I had made while sanding it in my garage. It steadied me. Not because I was enjoying her humiliation. I was not. There is a strange grief in watching someone expose themselves completely. You do not just lose the person they are. You lose the memory of who you thought they had been. Judge Whitaker removed her glasses and set them on the bench. That tiny sound, plastic against wood, ended the performance. Mrs. Caldwell, she said, this court takes misrepresentation very seriously. Lauren tried to speak, but the voice she used on clients and friends did not come. All that came out was a thin, careful whisper. I was scared. Judge Whitaker looked at the open file. The record suggests you were strategic. Marcus sat down beside me. He did not pat my shoulder. He did not need to. The blue folder had done what shouting never could. It had taken every name Lauren gave me and returned them to sender, stamped with dates, signatures, and her own words. The ruling did not come with thunder. It came in Judge Whitaker's steady voice, measured and clear, while the morning light stretched across the courtroom floor in pale rectangles. Lauren's request for controlling interest in Caldwell Structural Repair was denied. Her claim that I lacked the capacity to manage my affairs was rejected. The caregiver funds were frozen pending review. Several transfers were ordered for further examination, and the matter of false statements was referred through the proper civil channels. The house on Briar Ridge, protected by the trust my father had insisted on years before Lauren ever chose curtain colors, remained outside her reach. Every sentence landed with the clean finality of a door closing. Lauren sat beside Mr. Barlow with both hands in her lap, staring at the table like the wood grain might open and let her disappear. Derek slipped out before the judge finished speaking. I heard the back door of the courtroom open, then close softly. That was how men like Derek left when bills came due. Quietly, without carrying anything they had helped break. When it was over, Marcus gathered the papers without celebration. He clicked his pen, slid the blue folder back into his briefcase, and looked at me. You did well, he said. It was the closest Marcus ever came to a victory speech. I stood carefully, leaning on the cane, feeling the familiar pull in my leg and the unfamiliar lightness in my chest. Lauren rose at the same time. For a moment, we faced each other across the aisle. No attorneys speaking, no judge watching, no audience leaning in. Just two people standing in the wreckage of a life that had once included grocery lists, bad plumbing, Sunday coffee, and a wedding photo still hanging in a house neither of us had slept peacefully in for years. Her eyes were red, but I did not know if the tears were for me, for herself, or for the future she had failed to steal. Ethan, she whispered. My name sounded strange in her mouth, softer than it had in months. I waited. She looked at the cane, then at my face. I was scared, she said. Maybe she was. Fear makes people selfish sometimes. But fear does not forge signatures into weapons. Fear does not move care money to another man. Fear does not teach itself which words will hurt best in court. I nodded once, not because I accepted the excuse, but because I had no interest in arguing with it. So was I said. But I did not lie about you to survive it. She flinched like the words had reached a place the judge's ruling had not. I walked past her slowly, each step deliberate, my cane touching the tile in a rhythm I no longer hated. Outside, the courthouse steps were cold under the late morning sun. Columbus traffic moved around the square like nothing important had happened, buses sighing at the curb, office workers balancing coffee cups, a delivery truck backing into an alley. The world does that. Your life can split open, and somewhere a man is still late for lunch. A local reporter near the steps recognized the case from the docket and asked if I felt vindicated. I looked down at my hands, scarred from years of work, older than they used to be, still mine. No, I said. I already knew who I was. Today, she just ran out of people to lie to. Marcus gave the smallest smile beside me. 2 weeks later, I went back to the East Side job site where the accident had happened. The building had been repaired, reinforced, and cleared for tenants. New brick matched old brick closely enough that most people would never notice where the wall had been opened. But I noticed. Builders always notice seams. Luis met me at the curb with a hard hat and a cup of gas station coffee. He did not say anything sentimental. He just handed me the cup and said, "Foundation held through last night's rain." I looked at the building the clean lines, the steel hidden behind brick, the strength nobody walking past would ever see. My cane leaned against the bumper of my truck while I reviewed the plans. For the first time in a long time, it did not feel like proof of what I had lost. It felt like part of the story, one tool among many, nothing more. People think healing means going back to the man you were before the damage. It does not. Houses do not become new because you repair them. They become honest. You know where the weak points were. You know what was reinforced. You know what can carry weight now. I was not the man Lauren married. She was right about that. I was steadier, quieter, harder to fool. And when the afternoon sun hit the wet concrete and turned it silver, I picked up my cane, stepped onto the job site, and kept building.